New York Attorney General Letitia James, the same prosecutor who pursued Donald Trump on civil fraud charges, has now been indicted for bank fraud and false statements tied to a Virginia mortgage. Prosecutors allege that James misrepresented a Virginia property as a secondary residence to secure favorable mortgage terms. Misrepresented a property for favorable financial terms. Here to talk about the irony of all of this is Capitol Hill reporter for the Daily Mail. It is our friend Victoria Churchill back on the Davison Family Dentistry Newsmaker line. Hey, Victoria, welcome back to WHO. Good morning.
Good morning. Always great to be back on with you. You know, you've teed it up quite well this morning here, but, you know, I think the biggest part of this punchline is actually who has been living in this residence. And that turns out to be a family member, a grandniece, Nakia Thompson, allegedly lives in this indicted Virginia property, despite being wanted in North Carolina for probation violations. So I think as much of the joke as you've got there, I think I've got the punchline.
It's really amazing, Victoria, and let's just talk about the big picture here. We've talked about weaponized justice in this country, and we talked about the use of the justice system at Donald Trump. And I think it's legit if you're just a citizen of the U.S. that you don't want Trump to do the same, you know, and weaponize his justice system. But the fact is, it is interesting that the people that are going after Trump are being exposed for the corruption in their own lives, right?
Absolutely. And, you know, this goes deeper than just this tiff between Tish James and Donald Trump. You know, mainly in my role for the Daily Mail, I cover Capitol Hill. And just I believe it was last week, there was a hearing on Capitol Hill where, you know, we found out that the U.S. government in the Biden administration was spying on over half a dozen Republican senators that, you know, talking about weaponizing justice against your political opponents. You know, unfortunately, I wish nobody did it, but unfortunately both sides do it. And I think, you know, again, really there's just so much irony in the people that try to be so high and mighty and point fingers. And then, you know, when power changes, it turns out they've been doing the exact same thing or worse behind closed doors.
Well, and Victoria, that was one of the things I said when Donald Trump was reelected. I said all of the folks that thought that his political career was dead have to be heading toward the hills because they never thought he'd be back in power and have the ability to expose exactly how the government was weaponized against him and his supporters. And I think this is the tip of the iceberg, isn't it, Victoria? We're going to learn all kinds of things.
Oh, you know, I'm sure we definitely are. A lot of my colleagues that are based up in New York, specifically for the Daily Mail, have been covering the Letitia James side of this story. And, you know, they do great work. We do, I think, great work across our entire organization. And so, you know, I've loved just reading some of the things that they've come up with there. But another part of this, which I think is very interesting, is that Letitia James is supporting Zohran Mamdani's New York City mayoral bid. Of course, he's he calls himself a democratic socialist. He's exposed some views that I would personally evaluate as communist. And so actually, one of the things that Letitia James was complaining about in one of the recent stump speeches that she did for Mamdani was that she was decrying high rents in New York City, you know, while having a second property, while having somebody live there for free. So, like, I think the irony goes on and on and on, you know, with this woman.
Well, and Victoria, if I can throw one more headline into the discussion this morning, because I really do think it all comes together. People's upset over nobody else being prosecuted in the Jeffrey Epstein case. I really sense that with this political weaponization of the system and the selective prosecutions we're seeing, we really are eroding public trust in the courts, aren't we? Don't you see that?
So it's interesting. I think there's two ways that you can look at this. Obviously, there's the investigations that are going on in courts, you know, the actual legal cases. But then there's also separate investigations going on Capitol Hill, where Republicans, specifically on the House Oversight Committee, you know, because they know that they have allies in other areas of government, that they can uncover information that has been hidden for, you know, years, if not decades. they're actually calling out both people in their own party, former people in leadership, current people in leadership, to deliver information. But I actually wrote up a story just a couple days ago where the subpoenas were sent by the House Oversight Committee to a number of different individuals, attorneys general, both in the first Trump administration and even going back further than that. The current Department of Justice, they were requested to submit evidence that they have, and they can do that, but they argue that it's only to an extent because they have to protect victims and things like that. Despite victims actually going to Capitol Hill, I believe it was last month now. My timelines get kind of jumbled, honestly, with just the way Capitol Hill flows. But I believe it was late last month. Actually, it was before all this government shutdown stuff, where you actually had Epstein victims going on Capitol Hill saying, "We want these lists released. We're coming forward. Everybody already knows who we are. Now let's see who the people that did this to us or allegedly did this to us are." But another part of this that I found really ironic, and so I wrote it up for a piece, was that Bill and Hillary Clinton were asked to come in. Hillary last week at the tail end of the week, and Bill actually on Tuesday. And based on my sourcing that I've talked to, they may be doing that in the future because kind of those subpoenas are more or less binding, but the dates that they're asked to come in are not. But actually, right in between the date that Hillary was supposed to be on Capitol Hill testifying about Jeffrey Epstein and then Bill was supposed to be the following week, they actually did a fundraiser for Abigail Spanberger, who is running for governor here in Virginia. I think it really shows, at least to me, what I found kind of ironic was the priorities is, that they couldn't make time, at least in the days that they were asked, to come on Capitol Hill and testify about this person who they allegedly associated with for decades. But they could, take time to fundraise for a candidate that's running in Virginia, that hasn't at least outwardly denounced, members of her party wanting to shoot members of the political party. Of course, there's about that Jane Day Jones tech scandal that we're all following really closely here in Virginia. So, just the irony with the Democrats, I think, just keeps going and going and going. And the further you keep digging, the more stuff you find out.
That's why it's always fascinating to check in with Victoria Churchill, who is a Capitol Hill reporter for the Daily Mail. Victoria, thanks for